Greg used to interview movie stars, but now they're doing a podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 of our Lion King coverage. This one is all about the filmmakers. Let me tell you who's going to be on the show. We have Timon and Pumbaa's animators Mike Suri and Tony Bancroft, producer Don Hahn, lyricist Tim Rice, and co-directors Roger Allers and Rob Minkoff. I forgot to introduce ourselves. I'm Matt Levitz.
I'm Greg Trzebosty.
Okay, now we've introduced ourselves.
Very good.
Awesome. So I know I already talked about this in our episode for Disney's The Little Mermaid, but in the world of animation, the animator is the lead actor. Yeah, they bring in big names to provide the voices, and that's who you hear when you watch the movie, but the voice actors only worked for like 4 or 5 days on the movie in total. At most, maybe 10 days if the script kept changing. Everyone else works on the film for 3 to 5 years. Long days, long weeks, long months. And when you look at an animated character's performance, the expressions on their faces, the body language, all the life in their eyes where you can see them thinking and making decisions, the voice actors didn't do any of that. That's all the work of the animator. So when I tell you that Mike Suri and Tony Bancroft were the lead animators of Timon and Pumbaa, what I really mean is that they played those roles. The only thing they didn't do is the voices. Hit mute on your television and everything you see is them. Then on top of the performances, they also have to create the illusion of physics. The characters need to feel like they have weight and they're not floating around. They're affected by their environment, like if it's hot or if it's windy, that affects the character's mood in subtle ways, and it all has to be done manually and deliberately. And then in a movie like The Lion King, when all of the characters are animals, they all had to move like animals, and a lot of studying went into that. Long trips to the zoo, making notes, making sketches, learning how they walked, how they reacted to their environment, paying particular attention to musculature movement, how the animals shift their weight, stuff like that. All these things you would never even think about, but animators have to get it right, or the wrongness of it would break the spell and pull you right out of the story. So much goes into making animation work, and hopefully when you listen to these interviews that we have for you today, you're going to get a sense of that. So we're going to start off with Mike Suri, as I said, the lead animator of Timon. And Greg, if you don't mind, I found a website called 50 Most Influential Disney Animators, where Mike Suri is ranked at number 32. And I found some good bio information on him over there. So, giving credit where it's due, that's where I got the following. Suri was born in Canada and grew up in Toronto. After high school, he headed off to Oakland, California to attend the Sheridan Institute of Technology and Advanced Learning. He got his first jobs back in Canada working as an animation posing artist on low-budget TV shows. But when he saw Disney's The Little Mermaid in 1989, he realized he wanted to work at Disney, so he moved down to Burbank with the intention of getting a job there. He was hired as an assistant animator on Beauty and the Beast. Then he was assigned to be one of the animators working under Glen Keane on the title character of Aladdin. When The Lion King came along, several animators were considered for the role of Timon. They call it casting, which makes complete sense because, as I say, these guys don't just draw and animate their characters, they play them. Mike Suri wound up getting cast as Timon. It was his big break. And he did such a great job that after that he went on to play Clopin in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Turk in Tarzan, Rourke in Atlantis: The Lost Empire, and Buck in Home on the Range. At that point, he left Disney and he went over to DreamWorks to animate on the movie Shark Tale. But then Disney lured him back, and he played Ray the Cajun Firefly in The Princess and the Frog and Pascal the Chameleon in Tangled. Since then, he's gone back to DreamWorks and worked on The Croods and more recently How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. Again, the webpage I got this stuff from is 50 Most Influential Disney Animators, and the article goes on to talk about how Mike Suri always draws very expressive eyes, and his sidekick characters tend to be subtle, where other animators might go more broad. There's some interesting stuff there, so I urge you to check it out. And that's all I've got for Mike. Greg, anything you want to say?
That's it. That's very good bio intro on Suri. What a prolific career.
Yeah.
Here is the interview with Mike Suri. Enjoy.
I feel like I'm in a press conference, and I should look at this.
This is Mike
Mike
Suri.
Suri.
Are you now, or have you ever been?
I'm guilty. No.
Can we pin you, Mike?
Sure, you can pin me.
Do you need some water or anything, Mike?
Actually, yeah, some water would be nice. Look at all these.
So, can you explain to us, to our audiences particularly, what
your job is and what a supervising animator does?
Well, basically, it's looking after the character. Can you hear me there?
Yeah, it's
okay.
just that he was shorter than
Okay,
you.
there you go. Oh, there. I'll move a little closer. It's basically looking after the character in the way that we have on the case of Timon, there was about 4 or 5 other animators working on the character. So it was my job basically to design the character and then make sure that everybody after that got a scene on the character kept it the same. So it doesn't start looking like his version and this is my version. And so it was basically just to make sure that he stays consistent in look and as well as in acting.
So this is Timon. What is a
Right.
meerkat? That's what he
Meerkat.
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 Or a meerkat.
I don't know what a meerkat now.
It's a rat that's really.
Well, I wish before that, when they said it's a meerkat, I'm going, what's a meerkat? And we went on trips to the San Diego Zoo, and they say it's the most popular exhibit at the zoo, and it's mainly just because they're just these cute animals that are usually go into groups about 20, and they stand up on their back legs, and they're always looking out like this. And it looks very, cute. So everybody just loves bringing their family to this one exhibit. But they're part of, I think, sort of like a mongoose type animal. Love bugs. No.
It's an offbeat choice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, I
Well,
mean,
certainly when you think of his buddy, he's a big old warthog. So I don't think they hang out too much in the wild.
But I mean, were some more thinking of more conventional animals, or did it just like say, let's make him,
Yeah, well, to be honest, I don't really know where they got the idea of the meerkat from, but it's a good choice in the way that he is very animated, even in the real life. They're pretty animated animals. So the fact that they do move very quickly, they are quite vicious actually. They look really cute, and I'd like to touch that, but they'll just like rip your finger off if you get too close. So for that fact, the character Timon is vicious basically with his tongue more than anything. So it kind of helps out his whole personality, I think.
You said a key word a moment ago, cute, but that personality is very funny. I mean, he's the comedian, and he has some of the best lines in the whole film.
Yeah.
How did you translate that into the character? How did you make him cute but also funny?
Well, it's kind of taking, as far as getting the funny element in there, it's taking a lot of Nathan Lane, who's the voice, taking his looks and his personality and trying to get it into the character as much as I can, because he's the one doing the lines, so it makes it a little easier visually, I think, for everybody to kind of make the connection to this voice, to this character. Cute, well, I think some people even near the end of the movie that were working on it still thought he was cute, but
What did you know of Nathan before the casting, and what did you think about the choice of casting him in this role?
Well, I didn't know much about his work before, but then I researched a little bit and saw he's in Frankie and Johnny, and I looked at that, and Guys and Dolls.
Did you see Guys and Dolls?
Yeah, we went out to New York to see it, but he was on hiatus during that time, so we saw Ernie Zabella, who's doing Pumbaa, so at least we saw one of them, but but he turned out to be a very good choice. I mean, he sounds, I don't know what you think, but to me, when I was hearing his voice, he sounded a lot like Billy Crystal.
A lot like Billy.
But, yeah.
I was trying to figure out if he was Billy Crystal.
Yeah, but his laugh is Nathan's laugh is very, very distinct, and Billy's laugh, I think, sounded a little more like, he just had these really high, and I thought, well, I think they made the right choice, because Nathan has a nice range, and he can sing, and
Did you meet him?
Comes cheap in.
Yeah, Nathan Lane?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is he as funny a guy in person?
Yeah. Yeah, he can be, he's pretty much, he's pretty quiet at times, but when he gets going, him and Ernie Zabella, we went and saw them record the Kuna Matata song, but what it was called the Warthog Rhapsody, which was a completely different song. But we saw them, and when they get together, it's pretty funny, because they play off of each other very well, and it just worked out great for him.
You just raised an interesting question, though, or comment about Billy Crystal. Were there other people considered? I mean, did you audition several people that we know of, and did that change? How did that change the character of Timon?
I think the only change that I knew of was that Nathan Lane and Ernie were originally thought of for the hyenas. Actually, they had tried them out and thought, oh, these guys would be great for the hyenas, and I don't think they had anybody yet in mind. They were looking at people like Billy Crystal as a thought, but it's a matter of expense, and who do we really want, a big name, or do we just want somebody that really will help the character come across better? And I think they just thought, oh, well, listen to these two guys as the hyenas. They'd be pretty good for Timon and Pumbaa, and so they had them try it out, and sure enough, they sounded great. They worked out very well, I think.
Certainly, you were willing to get a lot of big names. I mean, what big?
Yeah. They had their share, So.
Earl Jones. So that you said
Jeremy
that,
Irons.
Yeah, and Jeremy.
Let's go through the list.
But I mean, so obviously that really isn't. I mean, what is the priority? Do you know?
For voice talent? Well, I think it's mainly their voice. I think it's their performance. I mean, you could probably have somebody who's pretty much a nobody come in, and if they have a very appealing voice or has lots of character, that'll be the priority over, I mean, not in all cases, of course, but in some cases it's this person might be just perfect for this role. We don't really need to get this big name artist. And I think what Nathan and Ernie, being that they know each other pretty well, worked out very well for the characters because they are so tight. And me and Tony Bancroft, who did Pumbaa, we're good friends, so it worked out for us too. We shared an office, and so we worked on a lot of scenes close with each other. So
Somebody in the production notes said that recording the dialogue separately is sort of like an off-Broadway tryout. Does that mean that you polish it, put it up against the character, and some things work and some things don't? Or how does the process?
Well, usually they'll get the basic storyboards down that they'll look at and say, okay, we want him to be saying this at this point, whatever, and they'll come in and read the lines, and then they'll throw it up against the drawings, and then it's really when it gets to the animation stage, or even just in a filmmaking stage, they might think, well, this line is running a little flat, let's bring him back, we'll redo that line. And for us, when we get to it, it's not, we don't have much say over, like, well, this line sounds rather flat. Can we get a new line? Can you get him in and do a new line? I mean, by the time it gets to us, it's like, can you guys just make it, get it animated so we can put it into the reel? And so it turns into, there's only on the rare occasion do you get a chance to say, well, it'd be better if he was to be a little louder on this line as opposed to being so quiet. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What is the timetable on these things now? I know Peter used to tell us it was a 4-year cycle. Have you guys shrunk that down at all? Or
I think it still stays that way from the beginning of it being pitched as an idea for an animated movie to where it gets to this point. I'd say it's about a 4-year cycle.
So are you working on another film as this one's finished?
Yeah, right now I'm on a new production. It's Hunchback of Notre Dame. So we're working on that right now. And that's just starting, but that was in pre-production. And which character are you supervising? Character name is Clopin, and he's the court jester, sort of the master of ceremonies of the Feast of Fools, and so he's kind of a sinister clown.
So another funny one.
Yeah, with a little more evil tinge to him. So
have people been cast in this already? I heard Meatloaf is the Hunchback. Is that?
Well, he was a thought. I think.
Oh, really?
I don't know if they've said on him. Yeah, he was an idea for Hunchback, and I can't recall any of the other names. I think it was Kevin Kline was an idea for the heroine, and let's see, Cyndi Lauper is a gargoyle. They have 3 gargoyles in it, which are pretty good. So
But your character has yet to be cast?
It's tentatively, I think they're looking at a Broadway performer, Paul Kendall, who's, was in Tommy, his Uncle Ernie. So, yeah, he's got a great voice, yeah. So it's kind of neat.
Sometimes we hear actors say that they take something from one role and carry it with them and use it the next time they do a role. They learn something from each character. How about with animators? Do you start literally from a blank page every time, or is something of Timon carried on in Clopin?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable to happen because a lot of times you'll find it in the drawing side of it and the designing side of a character. Not too many people, I think, outside of artists can really pick up on, without names connected to it, can probably pick out, oh, that guy worked on this character, he also worked on that, because they can kind of see similarities in a lot of design elements in the character, and also in acting. Everybody kind of acts the way it's kind of the same for every character I think you work on. You're just going to change it a little bit. I think in most cases with animators, if they start doing like villain after villain after villain, you might start seeing similarities a lot easier than if they started jumping around to different types of characters. So.
Did you work on Beauty and the Beast? And which?
I worked on Lumiere on that film, and Aladdin. I worked on the character Aladdin. So it's quite a different road than Timon. He's very different.
You have to live with these characters for a few years at a time, so it must be nice when the characters are a bit varied in your repertoire.
Yeah, it's nice that I've been fortunate in the way that I've had the variety of characters. It hasn't been typecast and people and animators do worry about that. Like I think live action actors think about being typecast because you
It
can't.
doesn't take a lot of patience, though. You have to wait so long to begin to see it take shape on the screen.
Well, it's you get the little teasers throughout the making of the movie. You know, it could be anything from seeing your first scene animated cut into the reel to seeing the first color scene. You know, so it's kind of a feeling of satisfaction when you see it kind of going through all the steps. It's just, but if you're used to making it that way, I think if I was to ever be in a live action film, it would probably seem really fast to me. It's like, boy, you guys whip this thing pretty quick compared to what we do. So.
How about the use of the computer as a tool? How much are you using it? In this movie, we have the herd scenes, right?
The wildebeest, yeah.
But for your work, are you?
Not really for you mean for Timon specifically, or no? There was mainly it's just in the actual rendering of the character, effects mainly. That if there's a shadow area on him or something, which is taken care of by another department. With our job, it's mainly the acting, the drawing side of it. We don't really have to deal too much in the effects or computer side of it.
I guess for laymen, it's not real clear how all this stuff is done anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a consideration that computers are going to
overtake.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Something you fall back on.
No, I don't think they. I think they're certainly getting close to, but they've yet to master, I think, the idea of doing a caricatured face or human without it making it look really kind of weird.
Well, being close to Aladdin, how do you feel about the straight-to-video that came out? Because I know you had to format a lot of that animation. So
that was held by another department, the Disney TV. So we didn't see any of that. It was actually a surprise to a lot of us because we were like, "Whoa, they made a Return to Jafar. Wow, what was that?" So
before you run off, you mentioned working side by side with the supervising animator of Pumbaa.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got to ask you, when you saw that there's going to be intestinal gas as something in a Disney film, what was your reaction?
I just hoped he wasn't going to be a method actor. That's all I know. And you'll probably see as he comes over here eventually. You can tell him I said that.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everyone, that was Mike Surrey.
Yep.
And we are back with some postscripts from Mr. Levitz.
Hello again. So Joey Berlin asked whether Meatloaf had been cast as the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Mike said he had been considered. That would have been a very different way to go.
Right.
As Disney fans already know, they wound up going with Tom Hulce for Quasimodo. He's the guy who played Mozart in Amadeus. Mike said they were considering Cyndi Lauper for a gargoyle. She didn't do it. The woman gargoyle Laverne wound up being played by Mary Wicks, who was also the old nun Mary Lazarus in Sister Act. But he also said that Kevin Kline was being looked at for Phoebus, and Kevin Kline did, in fact, wind up playing that role. And he was also right about Paul Candel for Clopin, so 2 for 2. It was interesting to hear him talk about what they look for when they're casting voices, because the animation industry has changed a bit from when this interview took place in 1994. Back then, you could hire 2 unknowns to voice major characters in your film. Nowadays, that rarely happens, because the studio insists on big stars that they can market. It's a big issue behind the scenes. I've heard Billy West talk about this a lot. Billy West is the voice of Fry in Futurama, and when I've seen him, and I've talked to him at some conventions, he says that it's really hard for him and for all of the veteran voice actors in animation to get cast in major roles anymore. And these guys are all amazing. I'll list a few of them. Legends like Joe Alasky, Maurice LaMarche, Tara Strong, Charlie Adler, Cree Summer, Jim Cummings, Bob Bergen, Jess Harnell, Rob Paulson, Tress MacNeille, Tom Kenny, D. Bradley Baker. The list goes on and on. These guys can do a million different voices, and their acting range is beyond reproach, but they just don't get the starring roles in big projects because the studios want famous names that they can send out to be talk show guests. I can actually see both sides here. It is a business. And fortunately, the video game industry isn't like that, so these talented guys can still do very well for themselves over there. But anyway, it was interesting to hear Mike Suri talk about it in regards to casting Nathan Lane and Ernie Sabella, because if they were making that movie today, I don't see those guys getting these roles, which is a shame. And finally, Mike Suri went on record saying he didn't believe that CG animation would ever supplant hand-drawn animation. Yeah, so moving on. Tony Bancroft. We now go from the lead animator of Timon to the lead animator of Pumbaa. Now, I've got a bio that I wrote up here.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Okay.
This is your film, Matt.
This is my film?
This is your film.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
I can't take any credit. I did not work on this film. Tony Bancroft grew up in Orange County, California, which you might recognize as the home of Disneyland. He went through the character animation program at Cal Arts in Valencia, California, which you probably know is the home of Six Flags Magic Mountain. Just throw that out there. For those of you who don't know, Cal Arts is owned by Disney. Their animation department teaches the Disney style better than any other school, and the studio recruits from there constantly. If working at Disney is your goal, then this is the college you want to go to. Just to name a few people who graduated from Cal Arts, I need to take a big breath for this. There's Brad Bird, Chris Buck, Tim Burton, Brenda Chapman, Peter Chung, Pete Docter, Lauren Faust, Jorge Gutierrez, Stephen Hillenberg, Alex Hirsch, Glenn Keane, John Lasseter, Craig McCracken, Rob Minkoff, Rich Moore, John Musker, Mark Osborne, J.G. Quintel, Joe Ranft, Jerry Reese, Henry Selick, Peter Sohn, Anthony Stacchi, Andrew Stanton, Gendy Tartakovsky, Gary Trousdale, Pendleton Ward, and Kirk Wise. Most of those names don't mean anything to Greg, but I'm guessing that if you're listening to this interview, they probably mean something to you.
I love Henry Selick, though.
All right. So there was one name you knew.
James and the Giant Peach.
Coraline, Nightmare Before Christmas.
Never heard of those. Yeah.
Monkey Bone.
Brendan Fraser, love it.
Anyway, Tony Bancroft is on that list. He graduated from Cal Arts. After graduating, he spent a summer as a production assistant with Ralph Bakshi. That's a name you probably know.
Fritz the Cat.
There you go.
Cool World.
Yep. And that led to an internship with Disney Feature Animation, which turned into a full-time job. He was an assistant animator on the Roger Rabbit short Roller Coaster Rabbit and on The Rescuers Down Under. Then he moved up to animator on Cogsworth and Beauty and the Beast and Iago and Aladdin. Pumbaa was his first job as a supervising animator. From there, he did Kronk and the Emperor's New Groove, arguably the star of that movie. In 1998, he moved into directing and he co-directed Disney's Mulan. He left Disney shortly after that, and he was a supervising animator on Stuart Little 2. In 2002, he created the faith-driven animation company Tunacious Family Entertainment. He's currently the Executive VP Creative Development and Production for Divide 9 Animation Studios. He did some animation on Disney's recent Mary Poppins Returns. He's the voice director of Red Shoes and the Seven Dwarfs. And he co-directed a movie called Animal Crackers, which at the time that we're recording this podcast, April of 2019, Animal Crackers has been finished for several years, but it currently does not have a distributor, which makes no sense to me. I mean, check out this cast, Greg. Emily Blunt, Danny DeVito, John Krasinski, Ian McKellen, Sylvester Stallone, Raven Simone, Patrick Warburton, Wallace Shawn, Gilbert Gottfried, and he can't get a distributor. Figure that out.
Oh, very good. Very funny.
You can, well, it's actually not funny. I mean, this is a movie I'd like to see, and you can check out the trailer on YouTube. It's actually posted up there. Looks like fun, and it looks like Disney-level animation. So if anyone out there listening to this works for a distributor, seriously, go check this one out. Last thing I want to say about Tony Bancroft before we hear from him, listen for him to use the phrase plussing. This is something that they say a lot at Disney. I've done a bunch of work for them over the years, and I hear them using this word all the time, plussing. It's part of their corporate speak. The idea is that no one takes complete ownership over any idea. There are dozens of fingerprints over absolutely everything. You do something, and then someone else comes along and adds to it and makes it better, and then someone else comes along and adds something else. So that's plussing, and it's a big part of their creative mindset. And you're going to hear the word slip out in one of Tony Bancroft's answers.
Very cool.
So that's what I got. Greg, anything you want to add?
Zero. I can't add anything really insightful after that. Really, really good stuff. Here is Tony Bancroft. Enjoy.
Lead animator of Pumbaa.
We gotta follow Ernie again.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Tony.
I don't sing like he does. Hi. How you
That's a
doing?
tough one, isn't it?
Yeah.
He comes in singing, dancing, and making
Joey,
bodily
those are for you
functions.
to Whoever has it, they're like.
I don't do that.
But we did hear that, in fact, you are really close pals with Timon's supervising animator. Don't put this in front of me.
What is this, a test? Or?
She's so nice to us all.
And that you have the same kind of friendship and rapport that he has with Nathan, or
Yeah.
some kind of friendship and rapport.
Yeah, we really do. Mike Suri and I go all the way back to Beauty and the Beast. We shared rooms way back then, and we've been sharing rooms together for the last 3 years. And even though we wanted to, believe it or not, we actually wanted to share rooms. And we had the opportunity on this one, since we're big time supervising animators now, that we could have had our own offices, but we actually decided for the production that it would probably be better if we did share a room again. So we did share a room so that I could be close to him and I could pass drawings over to him, and without calling him or walking down the hall or anything, that I could just say, "Hey Mike, what do you think about this?" And so that I'm not stepping on his acting cues all the time, since Timon usually is registered to the top of Pumbaa's head or on his snout or some kind of funny position like that. I didn't want to have Pumbaa overacting with his mouth positions or his nose going up and down, so that it would really screw him up.
Which character did you work on?
I did Pumbaa. I'm sorry, I thought you were going to say for Lion King. For Beauty and the Beast, I did Cogsworth, and Mike did Lumiere for a couple scenes also. So that was our first time working together, Cogsworth and Lumiere, and again we had to work very closely together to create a relationship.
And it sounds like in between the films there was a promotion, so I'm wondering how.
On this one, actually.
Right. So does this mean you have much more creative control over the life of the character? I mean, the look of the character.
Oh yeah, I'm God to that character. I created him. Well, visually anyway. Of course, Ernie does with his voice, and that's a big inspiration to me visually also. And hopefully the character kind of looks like Ernie Zabella. I think it does, if you ever see a photograph of him. But we started out with the character design being very realistic, and if you've ever seen a warthog, they're actually quite ugly and fearsome and brutally ugly characters. They're kind of the ugliest animals in the animal kingdom, I think. So we had a big design challenge set forth before us to whittle them down and simplify them into what would be something cute and attractive that people would actually want to look at and interact with in the way of an audience. So we really took the components that made a warthog, which is kind of the warts on his cheeks and the tusks protruding out of his mouth and the big furry mane and the big tail and the ears, and tried to keep those kind of aspects. And then we simplified him and gave him kind of more of a squattier pig body that was a little cuter and funnier in animation, and more spindly legs that didn't seem to ever logically support his weight, but do somehow through the magic of Disney animation. And we just simplified him down so that he was a little more attractive and appealing for the audience. And
what is it about animators sketching the actors? I mean, is this true? I mean,
it's a tradition that goes all the way back to when, I don't know why. We're just bored. No.
I mean, does that really give you movement? Instead
well,
of
it gives us expression.
Around, you're following Ernie around.
Well, I did a little bit of both, actually. I'm always following up Ernie and a warthog, it seems like, in the literal sense. So I get something from both of them. It's for an animator, we're kind of caricaturizing what a real warthog is, and in Ernie's performance, we have to kind of caricaturize his performance. So we're treading that fine line of anthropomorphic kind of a thing, humanistic acting with the acting of a real warthog also. So I had a dual responsibility in trying to research both of them, Ernie as an actor and what he would be like, and also a warthog as a warthog, and what that means to the character.
Do warthogs really have odor problems? Are they known for that? I was wondering.
Not in the flatulent sense, I don't think. That was just a character attribute that they added to the story and the character. Hopefully having nothing to do with Ernie and Mai's bad habits, I hope. But they do kind of gravel around they're kind of like pigs, so they kind of grovel in the mud a lot and that kind of thing. So they're dirty, stinky, basically, but not in the flatulent sense, really. That I know of.
You said you did follow warthogs around. Did you actually get some or go see some, or I guess you couldn't really have one in your office? We heard this wonderful story about when one of the animators had a cage of 12 rats in his office, and it ultimately, he was doing the rat in Lady and the Tramp, and it ultimately was so horrible that people couldn't come in because it smelled so bad.
Well, that's probably true. I did have a stuffed warthog head in my office as kind of reference, and luckily that didn't get to smell after a while because it was had formaldehyde in it and that kind of thing. But that was a great reference for me to see what the real thing starts out at. Plus, I had photo reference. Plus, on top of that, all 30 of us animators or whatever on the production went to San Diego for 4 days real early on in the production, and we drew animals and took video reference at the San Diego Wild Animal Park and the San Diego Zoo and Joan Embry's ranch, and we got a lot of help reference-wise.
Are there a lot of warthogs to see?
There was 2 or 3 in the cage, and luckily for me, because it seems like it was a hot day that day, and of course the animals are just laying around, not doing anything. When I'm trying to shoot reference, of course. But by coming back and forth to the cage, you get a couple little trots in there, and yeah.
Was Pumbaa? I mean, such a great character, but did it grow because of what everybody was bringing to it?
Oh yeah. I mean, it starts out. It's such a community kind of a project, these films. Everybody adds and pluses to it so much. I mean, it starts out with the storyboard artists and the directors coming up with who he is and personality-wise working in the story. Ernie adds a lot when he comes in and he does the voice and he brings it to life, but in a voice way. And then I come in and I'll create the design of the character and I'll do all the visual acting that has to correspond with what you hear in the voice. And that kind of a layering process is what really makes, I think, Disney animation as rich as it is.
But I mean, does somebody say at some point Pumbaa is so good that we've got to give him more screen time, or let's?
Oh yeah. When he first started out in the story, both Timon and Pumbaa were smaller characters, but they had a big responsibility in the gist of the story, in that you're really down very low story-wise at that point when they enter, because you've just seen the death of Simba's father. Simba's guilty because he feels like he's the one that did it. It's Pumbaa and Timon's responsibility at that point to turn you all the way around and start kind of an upward trek and get it more bright and more up, so it'll pump you into the second and third acts. So at first they just kind of did that in a very simple way, not a very effective way, and they weren't even involved in the last third act, pretty much. So after seeing subsequent sequences, the directors decided we need to pump these guys up. It needs to be a brighter film, so we need to have more of a presence of our comedy relief characters. So of course they go back and they rethink sequences that have just Simba and Nala, and they add Pumbaa, Timon, Simba, and Nala, and that brightens up the characters. It adds more personality to the film, and it just adds a certain layer to it that helps carry you through the rest of the film.
Do you have a favorite line for your character?
Well, it seems like he's always saying, "Oh, sorry," but
that's pretty good.
I don't. Yeah, well, I hear these lines like.
Gonna be jealous.
I hear these lines 100 times as I'm animating these scenes over and over and over again. Come on, Timon, that kind of a thing. It's just a little lion. So I could probably, recreate Ernie's whole performance and whole career in The Lion King, but I won't.
As entertaining as the character is, this is at least a couple years out of your life. for all of us, we interview people, we're on to the next interview. And most people, their job, they're on to different projects every month or every week. How do you retain your sanity? When you...
We don't. No, that's all. No, it is very labor-intensive thing that we do here in animation, and it's certainly not a sane thing. You'd think if anybody was sane, they'd be doing live action, or there must be another way to do it than drawing every 1/24th of a second. We draw 24 drawings per animated frame. Animated second in the film. And that gets very, very tedious, especially when it takes you, I don't know, on average about 5 minutes per drawing. You can imagine in a good week I put out 2 seconds of film, and it's a little hard sometimes. But once it's hard when you're doing it, but once you actually get that scene done and you shoot it on film or you shoot it on video to show the directors, it really pays off for you. It's enough of a lift that it'll push you on to the next scene without going nuts, because you actually see it come to life and it does what it needs to do, and that's where the real fun comes, when you're actually done with it and you film it and it moves. When it's just drawings on a pegboard or on your desk, it's a little hard to kind of go, yeah, that was worth it. I don't mind that. I'll do that again.
We'll have to move on now. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Okay, so we're back from the Tony Bancroft interview. Matt, you have some extra stuff to say?
Just one little thing. I hope that everybody caught that one part, and please feel free to post this on Reddit under Today I Learned, that when Tony Bancroft was animating Pumbaa on The Lion King, he did it with a real decapitated warthog head in his office, which he used for reference. Pleasant dreams, kids.
Is that true?
It's what he said in the interview.
Oh, I forgot. Oh, yeah. That's a little bit weird.
You think?
Yeah, a little bit, yes.
A little bit. So now we move on to producer Don Hahn. Full disclosure, I have spent a little time working for Don on a few different projects. Not through Disney. I worked directly for him as an editor. So I can tell you that he's a really great guy. He's really smart and funny, and he's got an encyclopedic knowledge of Disney history, which should come as no surprise because he's constantly writing and publishing books about Disney history. He's really passionate about it, which is fitting because he's quite a large part of Disney history himself. Greg, why don't you take this one? I've been doing most of the talking on this episode, so take it away.
Well, that's fine. I'm fine with that. Well, even though he's a producer for The Lion King, a lot of his passions lie in the documentary field, like Matt was saying. Documentary mixing with Disney history. For example, we've mentioned this before. 2009, he directed Waking Sleeping Beauty, something that Matt
great movie.
Great movie. Matt knows a little bit about that movie.
I worked on the bonus features on the DVD.
That same year, he released another documentary called Christmas with Walt Disney. Christmas with Walt Disney in 2009. In 2010, he released another documentary called Handheld. One of the things I'm really interested in actually checking out, a TV movie he directed in 2015 called Richard M. Sherman, Songs of a Lifetime. That sounds like something I definitely...
It wasn't a movie. It was almost a concert, but it was a concert in a soundstage.
Oh, wow.
So it was Richard Sherman singing the great Sherman Brothers songs. He wasn't always... He's not a good singer, but they brought in good singers, so he would play piano and they would sing it.
Very cool. And I'm a huge fan of the city of Pasadena, California, and I've always wanted to check out the Gamble House as a fan of the whole look of Pasadena. And in 2017, Don Hahn directed a documentary appropriately titled The Gamble House. And in the following year, he directed Howard, documentary that Matt knows about regarding Howard Ashman.
Howard Ashman, yes. And that movie actually used one of our sound bites from the Little Mermaid episode. We found that tape for the podcast, and because I know Don, I sent him the interview, and he was able to pull a bite and put it into that movie.
Very cool. And most recently, in 2019, he directed the TV movie documentary Freedom Riders: Stories from the Heart. So while he's produced ad infinitum just so many... Recently, he was the executive producer for Wonder Park. And Matt, you wanted to say something?
Well, yeah, you're leaving out his legacy at Disney. I mean, he's just done all these great things prior to this. So why don't you back up a little bit and
He executive produced the 1988 film Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Classic.
Tommy Trouble, the short, Michael and Mickey in 91. Obviously, we're talking about Beauty and the Beast, 91.
Which was a Best Picture nominee, which is the first time that it ever happened for an animated film. So huge accolade for Don Hahn.
And these are all producing credits. The Nightmare Before Christmas, 93. The Lion King, which we know The Lion King, 94. 2 years later, he produced The Hunchback of Notre Dame. The Emperor's New Groove was in 2000. Atlantis, The Lost Empire, The Haunted Mansion in 2003, and a bunch of other shorts. Video short One by One in 2004. He EP'd the 2007 documentary Earth. A couple years later, he EP'd
he's very involved in Disney Nature.
The Disney Nature stuff, Oceans, another Disney Nature thing, project 2011, African Cats. And also, a lot of people will love to know that he was also an EP on Tim Burton's Frankenweenie in 2012. He EP'd, executive produced Maleficent in 2014. He executive produced the documentary Tyrus, which you might know.
I worked on it, yeah.
Okay, and then, so
I was one of the editors on that film.
Right, exactly. And most recently, he also executive produced Wonder Park, and
the live-action Beauty and the Beast.
Okay.
He's done a lot of stuff. He's pretty legendary associated with the Disney universe. Last thing I want to say before we get to the interview, you are going to hear Cameron Turner ask him about Jim Fowler. For those of you who don't know, Fowler was the host of the TV series documentary Wild Kingdom from 1963 to 1987, and then again in the revival from 2007 to 2010. Fowler was the resident animal expert through the 60s, 70s, and 80s on The Dick Cavett Show, The Mike Douglas Show, The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, and Late Night with Conan O'Brien. And on The Lion King, he was a consultant. He brought live animals to Disney Studios for the animators to interact with, and he answered all of their questions. If you're interested, you can see footage of this on the bonus features for The Lion King on DVD on Blu-ray. So that's it. I think let's get to the interview, shall we? Don Hahn.
Don Hahn.
Everybody, this is Don Hahn. He's the producer.
It's true. That's on you. Absolutely.
Marathon.
Sorry, you'll have to hold your water. It is a marathon, isn't it? Yeah, I know.
Well, the same for you.
They should supply us with those truck driver helpers that you can just take a small break in the conversation.
Oh, my. You know all the questions at this point. Yeah.
You can just.
Perhaps I'll just go ahead and answer them all.
I'm sorry, he said your name so quick.
I'm Don Hahn, the producer of The Lion King. It's true.
Producer of Beauty and the Beast as well.
Yeah, it's true.
We've been hearing, and we talked with Rob Minkoff earlier, and people keep talking about this renaissance in animation, but it really seems to be you guys over here at Disney who are, so what do you guys know that
everybody else doesn't? I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. Thank you. There's a great willingness to throw things out, I suppose, is the key word. At other studios, you can't write a script and just send it into production and hope that it all works out okay. Traditionally at this studio, we've thrown wholesale movies out and rebuilt and songs and tried to craft these things one frame at a time. It's all driven on story. It's all driven by the fact that we need to tell a great, engaging story with likable characters. If that doesn't work, we should pack up and go home. And all the layers of great color and animation and art direction don't matter, really. It's all about the story. And I think that's probably the key to what's going on here. Plus, there's great support and mandate for animation from the top on down, from Roy and Jeffrey to make these movies.
It's time that you guys had the audacity or courage or foolishness to do a story of your own.
Yeah.
Apologies to Shakespeare, I guess.
Yeah, Shakespeare in the Old Testament. Yeah, it is. You know, it's an original story, but then again, it's not at all original because it is kind of that Joseph Campbell Old Testament Greek mythology hero's journey story that is, prominent. It's the character who has to it's Moses, a young prince who's raised in royalty and is exiled and that turns into Joseph, or turns into Hamlet for a while. He's tortured by the death of his father and then has to return and reclaim his kingdom. So there's stories that are very familiar to us, and I think because of that, The Lion King will be a comfortable fit for an audience.
Why the jungle, though? I mean, as opposed to...
Well, it's a great place we haven't been to before. It's not Western fairy tale land. It is a very primal place where we can trot out great primal music and emotions. So even though it's all animals and lions in Africa, this very human story, this human allegorical story, can be told in very powerful terms set against that landscape, I think. And so that was the ambition of the film, is to tell that kind of hero's journey, coming-of-age story set against that kind of backdrop, that there would be a power in that.
Were you part of the group that went to Africa?
No, I wasn't. I was the month they went. Nobody went to Africa, for God's sake. What is this? It's a myth.
He got his shots, though.
Yeah, I did get my shots. I didn't use them. Roger, when he comes around, is the only guy you'll talk to today that went to Africa. So save your Africa questions for him. I was finishing Beauty and the Beast at the time and passing out.
Because having seen East Africa myself,
yeah.
I think there's a real respect, even though it's not a photographic, you don't try to recreate the landscape photographically, but there's a real respect for the spirit of it and a real sense.
Right. Well, I think we sent the art directors and our head of story and Roger over there, and I think they were moved by the fact that it wasn't this kind of brown savanna that they saw on the old Wild Kingdom show. That it was a very special, lively, alive, noisy, beautiful place. And so in trying to create Africa on the screen, the directors went the extra notch and created kind of an enchanted, heightened sense of that as the backdrop for this film. So that was a really influential trip, I think, for those people.
You mentioned Wild Kingdom. Jim Fowler.
Jim Fowler.
Called in, was he not?
What a great guy. He's like a real-life Indiana Jones. You go out to dinner with him, and he has scars up his arms, and was really instrumental early on in educating all of us about animal behavior and just what these cats are like. And it brought in fact, 4 or 5 big cats one day. We had an adult male and down to a cub, and he would just sit there and tell us about their behavior and that they like to butt heads and that, just kind of how it all worked. And it really got us off on the right foot, because that was our probably biggest hurdle on this film, is to try to convincingly portray this animal kingdom.
Did the lions always behave themselves when they were being observed?
Yeah, most of the time. The animators didn't, but the lions did. They spray their territory once in a while, but they were pretty well behaved.
The animators or the lions?
The animators, yeah. It's if you haven't seen it, it's a beautiful thing.
Can you speak generally about the approach to the music this time? We've seen with the last couple of films a real Broadway type of a score.
Well, one of the reasons I was drawn to the project was because of Elton and Tim. I thought, here's an opportunity to branch out from that Broadway kind of paradigm that was extremely successful in Beauty and Aladdin. And Tim, of course, attracted Elton to the project. And Elton's gift for creating great melodies, I think, was part A of the equation. And then the capper to that was being able to pair them with Hans Zimmer, who was able to bring on board that kind of power of one, kind of African world music ethic to the score of the film. And his ambition to go to South Africa and get the choruses singing on top of the film, to create this musical world with Elton's melodies, I think is what really you hear in the score of The Lion King. And I really, Hans is a big, big part of the music of this film. Big part.
A big switch. Speaking about music, we were touching on this with.
Hi, welcome back. No, go ahead. Listen, I'm next. So. Save some for me.
We were touching on this briefly with Tim Rice, and that is the stage musical is certainly still thriving, although some people would say struggling.
Right.
You've certainly proven that the animated musical works, but we have yet to see a successful live-action musical come back.
Why is that? Are we, as an audience, unable to suspend our disbelief like we were with Sound of Music? I don't know. That's really interesting. I honestly don't know the answer to that. People, yes?
I know.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Gene Kelly said just because of the change in musical styles that that contemporary music doesn't let with the quick cut, fast beat, doesn't lend itself. That you need ballads, you need romance in order to make the traditional musical work. And until we have that.
But what if he's wrong? With animation, well, what's accepted with animation?
Well, you do. For some reason, you accept a lot of things with animation that you would just hoot at in a live-action movie. One thing, for example, is the great range these movies have. You can have a character belching and farting, and 30 seconds later, have a character poignantly looking at the stars and remembering the death of his father. It's exactly what happens in the film, but somehow you buy that turn. So I think that's the strength of the medium, and the fact that you can have a romantic ballad play in animation. It works. Howard Ashman used to say on Beauty and the Beast that animation was kind of the last home for the Broadway musical. Because of that, somehow you're able to suspend that disbelief in animation.
You see, the Broadway musical is pretty much dead. I mean, they stole your movie, or hopefully you're catching
no comment.
in on your movie.
That's not me.
But unless you count Sondheim, there wasn't a musical whole season.
No, it's true. It's true.
You're talking about belching and farting. Is Walt spinning in his grave? I mean,
I like to think he's right there with us. I really do. No, not at all. I think it's great. It's reflective of the age we live in. And I think it's just a range of comedy that's fun to get into. And, we handle it very discreetly.
It's true. People do belch.
It's a shocking thing. Yeah. I don't know.
Talk about it more.
They do. I wish they wouldn't, but they do.
Well, the death, it's been beaten to death, I guess. But, I mean, the fact that... Simba's father dies is kind of, I mean, obviously, how far did you really go in analyzing it? Did you call in teams of child psychologists? Did you agonize? I mean,
well, I suppose the real answer is, we're sensitive to it. We are cartoonists and entertainers. We are not psychologists. We are storytellers. We wanted... That death of Simba's father was always central to the story, and we knew that to make the movie work, it had to be not gratuitous, but a very central issue that Simba had to deal with in his life. And to celebrate that life is about that range of emotions. It is about laughter and death and tears and all of those things. So we knew that as long as it was central to the story and done in an honest way, we'd be okay. So we tried it, and I feel comfortable with the level we've attained. We didn't try to whitewash it. We didn't try to pull our punches. We didn't try to have Mufasa shake it off and get up and walk away. All of which we could have done. I think the best way to do it in this particular film was to just meet it head on and try to deal with it.
Did you ever get any flack in test screenings or from people?
Oddly enough, no. And I even was surprised at that. We sent it out and I thought we'd get some comment. Most people completely understood why it was in the film because it is so central to the film. And at most, we would get a comment like, I thought it might be too intense for small children, but I understand completely why you did it. I think that's what makes this movie a little bit different from maybe Bambi or other films like that, because the death of his father is so central to the story, and it's what he has to deal with, and it's what how the movie gets driven ahead.
Will you understand if some of us, because I feel I have to do this, will write in our pieces and warning parents, or alerting parents, I should say, that you're going to be dealing with this, especially parents of young children. I think they ought to go into it recognizing that they're going to face this, the questions about, Mommy, Daddy, are you going to die?
This is a very personal response, but I think that's a great thing. I think this is a movie that parents should see with their children for those very reasons. They're good discussions to have, and sometimes there's not a forum or a reason to have those discussions while you're sitting around the dinner table at night. Again, we're not psychologists.
Is there anyone
we make animated films, but I think it's great. I think it's great if a family can go and see this movie and talk about it on whatever level.
Isn't that in the great Disney tradition now? I mean, you talk about Walt spinning in his grave about farting and belching. There have been, Bambi's mother died. There have been, horrible dragons.
Oh, Old Yeller and all those things. It is 100% in the Disney tradition. It really is. And I think that kind of intensity of storytelling is what can make these films great. I really dislike the notion of having to whitewash an aspect of the story. I think it's better to portray the whole spectrum of emotions.
How do you feel about all the hype that has surrounded this film? Advanced ticket sales, the heightening of the anticipation. I mean, is that inevitable, I guess?
Yeah, it's great on one level. It's great when the reaction and the buzz is so good about a movie this early on. We're fortunate to be in that position, so it feels great. It feels really great.
How do you feel about advanced ticket sales?
They're really good. We're selling them big. We're 65,000 seats. My God, we're going to make $1 million on this one. Yeah, it's great. It's a great tactic. It goes back to something they used to do, I suppose, in the 50s or 60s for the big biblical epics and things, is all the advanced ticket sales and things. And it's great. It's great. It's commerce. We don't talk about that too much, but there is a commerce side of these things that's lovely.
Thank you, guys. One more question? Go ahead.
One more question. When we asked one of your co-directors what he's working on, he said he's tan. What about you? What are you working on?
Reacquainting myself with my wife and child. That's
You don't care about your tan.
I don't. I'll never have a tan, my God. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks a lot.
And congratulations.
Thanks. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, so we're back. That was a Don Hahn interview.
It was.
And now we are off and running with lyricist Tim Rice, 3-time Oscar winner. Tim
Rice. And Greg, I'd like to take this one because, as you know, I'm a fan of musicals. Tim Rice is a renowned lyricist. He doesn't write music. He pairs up with music writers, and they split the songwriting duties. So he's a great partner for any songwriters who don't write lyrics, such as Elton John, for example, who he collaborated with for The Lion King. Rice came into prominence in the late 1960s through the mid-70s with 3 collaborations with Andrew Lloyd Webber, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, Jesus Christ Superstar, and Evita. In 1984, he wrote the lyrics for a show called Chess, and the music was written by a couple of members of the band ABBA, and they actually had a huge radio hit from that show with a song called One Night in Bangkok, which Greg will sing for you now.
Oh, no, I can't sing it because it'd make a hard or soft man like me humble. Yeah.
Nice. So you do remember the lyrics then, which was Tim Rice. Rice has done a lot of other theater shows as well, but you probably haven't heard of them. I did see a London production of his musical From Here to Eternity when it was broadcast into movie theaters for a couple of nights, and it was pretty good. Rice was brought into Disney to finish the songs for Aladdin after lyricist Howard Ashman died halfway through the process. Then he stuck around and did The Lion King with Elton John. In 2017, he and Alan Menken wrote some new songs for the live-action Beauty and the Beast, and I think that about covers it. Now, towards the end of the interview, he is asked about the movie version of Evita. At that moment, in 1994, Oliver Stone was still attached to direct it. There's actually a very long story about the development of that movie, and if you're interested to hear it,
yes,
I recommend that you search through the archives of this very podcast and find our Evita episode. I spent about 10 minutes going through this whole thing. Tupac Shakur is in that episode as well, because of course he is. On that note, because he's a lyricist, let's get to Tim Rice.
Before we get to Tim Rice, I just like this quotable thing about him. A little teaser for you guys, if you want to listen to this Tim Rice interview. Obviously, he is a legend, but I love how he said writing is like a crossword puzzle. He talks about the process of writing as well. So that should be very interesting for you guys to pick up in this interview with Tim Rice. And here we go.
We're introducing ourselves.
No, I'm Chuck from CBS Radio. Pleasure.
Heather Dean, AP.
AP.
Cameron Turner, Premier Radio.
Where are you based?
Here in Los Angeles.
All right.
Alan Silverman with Voice of America.
Catalina Reyes with the Albuquerque Journal and KUNM.
KU?
Public Radio. I hear it means your butt in Farsi, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Sounds even ruder than that to me, but never mind.
Joey Berlin, New York Post.
Joy?
Joey.
Oh, Joey.
Joey.
Joy.
Well, some people call him Joey.
Joy is true.
He is a joy.
Joy. Laura Gross, LEG Productions, Los Angeles.
LA?
LEG Productions.
Oh, LEG.
Shep Morgan, Gene Wolf's Hollywood from Los Angeles.
Great.
Well, we heard you when the last time we were here, and there were animals around too.
Oh, right.
Yes. And you talked about working with Elton John and the fact that he wanted to see the lyrics first rather than giving you a melody to write the words to. What difference did that make in terms of what came out?
I think in this particular project, it was an advantage to the project that the words came first, because the songs very much had to be part of the script, and it was saving everybody quite a bit of time. Certainly Elton, if one gave him a lyric which was fairly certain to fit into the plot. Despite that, there were still lots and lots of changes. But even though I was therefore writing in the first place, I was writing lyrics without a tune. In many cases, having got Elton's tune back, because the plot would change a bit, I would then end up writing lyrics to the tune that he'd given me. So I was doing a bit of both. But the procedure of writing lyrics first is quite new to me. I hadn't done much of that before. And on the one hand, you've got a lot more freedom, which is great. You can ramble on, but there is the danger of doing just that, of not being very concise, of saying something in 12 lines when it would be better said in 8 syllables. But I think on the whole it worked out well. I think humorous songs, patter songs or villain songs, it's often best to do the words first. But I think the ballads, the romantic songs, even though we didn't do it this way round, I think most ballads benefit by the tune coming first.
The opening song, Elton surprised you with the speed with which...
Yes, that was...
Could you describe that process?
That was absolutely extraordinary. I wrote The Circle of Life, which originally we did another version of it with slightly different lyrics, and we knew The Circle of Life was going to be an important theme for the film. And I don't think we knew where it was going to come in the film. We thought it might be perhaps the father explaining to the son, so it might come 10 minutes into the picture. And the first set of lyrics I wrote, which were sort of along the same lines, Elton delivered a very up-tempo number, rather very, very rhythmic, and frankly not suitable. It was a nice, good rocker, but wouldn't have been right for Mufasa to sing. And it really was too wordy, and so we had to start completely again. And I then wrote a slightly shorter lyric. I mean, I pared down the themes and said to Elton, we need a big ballad here, and this is now going to be the opening of the whole film if it works. And it will be sung by an anonymous voice, maybe man, maybe woman, but it'll be a strong, powerful voice, and it's a big ballad. And we were both in England, as we usually are, and he said he had a session on Thursday afternoon in a studio in London. And I said, fine, well, I'll get the lyric to you by about Monday, because I was still making a few adjustments. And he said, no, bring it along on Thursday. And I thought, all right. So, of course, I didn't do a stroke on Monday or Tuesday, and Wednesday night finished it off, took it in on Thursday, and he sat down at this keyboard with a bloke doing percussion noises and just played the lyrics over and over again, and gradually this tune emerged, and it was sensational. And by the end of an hour and a half, we had not only a great new song, we had a great version of it. I mean, it could have been stuck out as a single then, I think. And it was amazing to see him work so fast.
How do you feel about... These are the type of songs that win Record of the Year and win all the Grammy Awards, and probably inevitably Circle of Life will be Record of the Year, Song of the Year, a year down the road from now. How do you feel about all those accolades?
Well, I haven't had them yet.
No, but inevitably this is what happens with a song like this.
Well, there may be some other very good songs floating around. You never know. I mean, who knows what Elvis Costello is working on at the moment? And who cares?
The thing is, the songs that you're writing for this film are especially for this film, as opposed to some rock star who comes out, who's putting out an album anyway, and one of his songs gets onto the film for the credit roll, and then all of a sudden he or she is nominated for best, Oscar.
Yeah, I think there's an enormous over-emphasis on awards, and with great respect, it's much worse in this country than it is in England. In England, we don't really have any awards worth talking about, so you can say you've won 4 Alfreds and people will be very impressed, even though Alfreds don't exist. Whereas over here, there's an obsession, particularly on Broadway. I mean, I've just been nominated, I think, for a Tony for Beauty and the Beast, with, of course, Alan and Howard. I'm actually the minor contributor to that particular score, but if I hadn't been nominated, it would have been an incredible insult, because there's just nothing on Broadway. There's Passion and Beauty and the Beast, and everything else has been an absolute disaster. So people are going, oh great, you won a Tony. Well, if I hadn't, I think I would shoot myself. I mean, it is ludicrous, and that's an extreme example. I mean, Oscars are different because there's usually much more competition. But I do agree with your point that sometimes you get a song stuck into a film which bears no relation to the movie. And I think if you're going to have film songs, then you should, on the whole, consider only songs that are written as part of the movie. But there again, there's some terrific songs like that Bryan Adams song had nothing to do with Robin Hood at all, but it's a great song.
You were wearing a striped shirt, I believe, at the second presentation.
Oh yes, I was very worrying. Oh.
Yes, and I hear that poncho, was that the lion's name?
Yes, I suddenly realised that this lion, which only had Jeffrey Katzenberg really hanging onto it, and his trainer, was looking at me with much more interest than the zebra. And I had this striped shirt, I looked like a zebra. And I thought, yikes, you know. And I thought, I'm on a stool, so if he does go for me, I can, you know, do the old lion taming act. But it was really very worrying. Actually, this lion was definitely looking at me.
Oh, I had heard he actually kind of went for you. That was
Oh, no, this is a wild exaggeration.
I don't know if you noticed that the trainer was crouched down and she kept saying, stay.
Yes.
So we're doing that.
it was very scary.
It was actually, you know, when you see a lion more or less loose, I mean, right, the guy was holding it by the chain, you actually realise, you know, you wouldn't have a great chance there, you know, telling him, I've been nominated for a Tony, would not impress the lion.
Well, you were talking about Broadway before, what a disastrous year it has been. Why
Well,
is
for
that?
musicals particularly.
Yeah,
I mean, I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen Passion.
I walked out of Greece the other day. I was telling her.
Well, Grease was a big hit in London. I didn't see that, but Grease is a big hit in London, and actually it's been done very well, and I suspect one of the reasons why it works in London is that it's got its tongue in cheek. I'm sure it has here, but they've also put in all the songs from the film, which were actually, you know, not written for the show, and I don't think they've got that here. So the score is lumbered without having "You're the One That I Want" and "Hope Is Devoted to You" and all those great songs.
Well, what do you think has to happen to Broadway in order for good musicals to be coming out again? Why do you think there's so little of them?
I think most great writers, contemporary writers, don't really consider Broadway as worth bothering. It's a vicious circle. It's been run far too long by dreary producers who are really real estate merchants, and they always kowtowed to critics. They actually thought Frank Rich was important, and the man was a moron, in my opinion. And it was a tragedy that any show that Frank Rich attacked, the producers usually agreed with him and said, "My God, we've got a flop. Let's take it off." And it just became, it's a vicious circle. It got worse and worse, and it wasn't even really Frank Rich's fault. It was the fact there's only one newspaper that anybody reads for the theatre. It's a tragedy because, I mean, Broadway just, you know, needs to produce. I mean, it's been coming much more out of London in the last 20 years simply because we have more newspapers, we have more wacky producers, and people are slightly more, they don't take it quite so seriously, ironically. In Broadway, it's like, this is Broadway tradition, and they all rave over great writers like Gershwin, but Gershwin ain't around anymore. And, you know, when Frank Rich hails a Gershwin revival as Broadway comeback, it's stupid. I mean, you know, of course we should revive the great people like Gershwin, but he's 50 years out of date now. Well, not out of date, that's unfair, 50 years old.
Can you talk a bit about the fact that you have you've become a part of the Disney family now, which is a really, I think, very honored, special place to be, and you came in, you know, on the sad death.
Yeah, it's terrible.
But can you talk about being a part of the family, the projects that you're going to do, and how you feel about this Disney connection?
Well, I feel thrilled because it really is, I mean, Disney is numero uno in the field of animation. And I truthfully can say that I loved all the movies as a child, and I've always been a cartoon nut. And the people I've worked with on the two films I've worked on have been delightful people. And also I've obviously got to know some of the top executives, and I'm very impressed by the way the whole thing's run, and you can see why it works. They are very, very well run. It's efficient. And they don't take as much notice of, you know, critics as the Broadway producers and organisers do. They care about the public, which is really the most important thing, and they do it without going ludicrously down market. I mean, I'm very thrilled to be a part of it. I know that when I've snuffed it, my songs in these two films will still be around, which is, and you never quite know that in Broadway. I'm not sure. I mean, they're keen for me and Elton to do another one, and I've had endless discussions with Jeffrey Katzenberg and other people about possible things to do.
And how about you and Alan?
Oh, I'm Alan and I are thinking of trying to do a stage show. I'm not quite sure where we'd launch it, but I'm not. I mean, in all honesty, I'd like to take the next year off. I mean, there's a wonderful expression: no man on his deathbed ever wished he'd spent more time at the office, and I don't want to spend too much time at the office.
Well, where do your lyrics come from?
Rhyming dictionary.
I mean, do they come in odd places like the shower, driving a car, or do you really sit down and?
No, you sit down. You have to sit down and say by 5 o'clock. I will have done 8 lines or try to. Obviously, if you're stuck and you go for a walk with the dog, sometimes you'll go, this is the missing word. But it's like a crossword puzzle. It's very, you can't, I don't think, be inspired and suddenly come up with 9 lines of wonderful poetry, or even 9 lines of crappy poetry.
The showstopper in this movie, I'm sorry.
No, sorry, I forgot what I was going to say now.
The showstopper in this movie is a Kumba Matata, and can you just tell us the genus?
You see, that's interesting. I thought that was the least strong before I saw the film.
Absolutely.
But when I saw the film, it really works.
How did those lyrics come up? What does it mean exactly?
Hakuna Matata is Swahili for no problem, no worries. It probably literally means something else, but that's what it is. No, I originally wrote a song called the Warthog Rhapsody, which I thought was actually rather funny, and it worked very well, but it was felt that the emphasis was too much on the warthog, brilliant star though he is, and they wanted something that was a bit more laid back. And in fact, my one regret of the entire film, not that it makes a heap of the difference, is that there was another verse written for Timon, the meerkat, and Pumbaa's sort of flashback to his life, explaining how he got into this Hakuna Matata philosophy, which begins, when I was a young warthog, when he was a young warthog, and all that. And we had a verse for Timon, which started the whole song, was when I was a young meerkat, and they ever go, when he was young, and it was all about how when he was a meerkat, he spent all his childhood and adolescence and young manhood guarding with the other meerkats, doing all this bit and looking around. And he suddenly thought, stuff this for a game of soldiers, and decided, Hakuna Matata, I'm on my own. And it that was only 45 seconds, and I think it would have made that song even stronger. But the thing was that we didn't realize how strong the song was until we saw it animated, by which time it was too late to stick the other bit in.
Tim, do you work closely with Linda Wolverton?
Yes, very much so, on Beauty and the Beast as well as on this one. She's terrific. I'm a great fan of Linda's.
Are you involved
when you
at all?
included gas in the Warthog Rhapsody, or what became Hakuna Matata, what was the reaction to that when people saw?
You mean, this character has nothing to do with me. He was created with this problem. And we had to bring this facet of his character out.
They gave that to you and said...
Well, it was part of... it was one of the running gags in the show. And I thought, here I am, 25 years in the business, and I'm writing songs about farting.
Are you involved at this point in the production of Evita, like the songs that will be part of the film?
Evita?
Yes. Have you heard any of the songs?
Sorry, have I heard any of the songs in Evita?
Yeah.
No.
Any rumblings for the Oliver Stone film version of Evita? Have you been consulted as to which songs will stay?
Well, I sincerely hope they'll keep all the songs. There's nothing wrong with any of them, in my humble opinion, he said very arrogantly. No, I haven't been consulted very much at all. But I'm sure, Oliver is very quiet on the phone. I can't hear what he says, just a quiet voice. So I say, yeah, great. And I don't know what I'm saying, yeah, great, too. He might be saying, we're going to do it in ice, on ice, and we're going to cut out. But I would think we'll probably be able to, Andrew and I will probably be able to get involved with it nearer the time. But at the moment, we haven't started yet.
There's just one question that relates to that, and that is, this would be a musical with real actors. And we were talking about the stage, animated, but there has not been a successful musical on film.
It's not my fault.
What do you think it's going to take?
I don't know. It may be impossible. Who knows? But Evita might work because she was a person who was of the movie era. She used news film and very effectively, so it might work.
Any casting choices for Evita?
I'd like to see Madonna do it, but nobody agrees with me, or nobody who matters does. So. No, she's great. She looks fantastic. She is Evita. I'm sure that A, she won't do it, and B, somebody else will do it very well.
She would love to do it.
Yeah.
All right, we are back from our Tim Rice interview. Matt, you have some stuff?
I have some stuff. If the last minute or two of that interview sounded familiar, we did publish that part already in our Evita episode, but, these are sound bites so nice, we played them twice. He talked about a song that Timon and Pumbaa sang called Warthog Rhapsody, which was recorded by the actors Nathan Lane and Ernie Sabella, but never used because it was replaced with Hakuna Matata. Rice said that he was sorry that people would never get to hear it. But, of course, today that song is very easy to find. It was released by Disney later on 2 albums, Rhythm of the Pride Lands and The Legacy Collection. And you can hear it on Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you want, really. And it was rewritten for the direct-to-video sequel, The Lion King 1.5, becoming the song That's All I Need. But I don't think Tim Rice was involved in that, so if you want to hear the lyrics that he wrote, search for Warthog Rhapsody. Now, he said that Jeffrey Katzenberg was keen to have him and Elton John write songs for another Disney animated movie, and that didn't happen. They didn't write for another Disney animated movie after The Lion King, but Katzenberg left Disney shortly after that, and he co-founded DreamWorks, and he did wind up hiring Tim Rice and Elton John to write songs for another animated film just over there. It was The Road to El Dorado in 2000. And by the way, that's the same year that he and Elton John collaborated on the theatrical musical Aida. So unless you have anything else for Tim Rice, Greg?
No, we're done with Tim Rice. We are now transitioning over to Roger Allers.
Correct. The co-director.
Yes.
So I will tell you a little bit about him. Greg, you want to get his credits ready so you can do that part. I will just say that according to his Wikipedia page, Roger Allers was born in New York but raised in Arizona. He went to Arizona State University and Harvard. And then here's one of my favorite sentences I've ever read on Wikipedia. It says, he spent the next 2 years traveling and living in Greece, where he spent some time living in a cave and met Leslie, whom he later married. From the way this is phrased, it sounds like he met her in a cave. Anyway, Greg, why don't you take us through some of his film credits?
I mean, he's a writer, director. On the writing side, he's done a lot of work. I remember Animal Olympics from 1980.
Oh, yeah.
He did the story for that. Oliver and Company in 1988. Obviously, Aladdin, the story for Aladdin. Now, he also... The Emperor's New Groove was based on his story. That was 2000. And then other writing credits include The Lion King 3, Hakuna Matata, the video.
Which was actually released as Lion King 1.5.
Okay, right. You were mentioning that. And there's also this short. He also did the 2006 short. He wrote that, The Little Match Girl. And here's the thing. What's interesting about this is he's also a director, but he only has 5 credits. Okay, so co-directing The Lion King in 94, the short The Little Match Girl in 2006. I never did see Open Season, which was a wide release in 2006.
No. It's cute.
It's cute. Okay,
I mean, it was good enough to get several direct-to-video sequels.
Okay, so and then it was about 8 years later, funnily enough, when he directed The Prophet, an animated film based on the Khalil Gibran story, iconic classic story. And what's interesting about that is in 2014, I did a little mini press junket, and I never got to interview Roger, but I did interview its producer, Salma Hayek, for The Prophet. And actually, I did see The Prophet, and I know animation is your thing and your passion, and musicals as well. But once in a while, I will see an animated film, and I will actually highly endorse The Prophet, which came out in 2014. So, bottom line is, I actually wish, just from obviously The Lion King, I haven't seen the Open Season, but just from The Lion King and The Prophet, my wish is Roger Allers actually directed more projects. So,
well, hopefully he will.
Hopefully he will. Okay, so without further ado, here is the interview with Roger Allers. Here we go.
I'm finally going to get asked my questions. Oh, good.
Someone who actually went after you.
Everybody, this is Roger Allers. Hi. This is table 12.
Hello, table 12.
Hello.
This is table 12. Since everybody's been tired of hearing me ask the question over and over again, I'll start with it because you are the sole representative of everybody who's here who was on the trip to Africa.
That's true.
What dimension did that add? I mean, you can write or create of a time that you've never been to, of places you've never been to. Why was it important to go to the actual film?
Well, for one thing, we really wanted to have the vitality of Africa represented in the film. And you can get only so much out of books. And there was the sense of being there, having the sense of distance, the sense of atmosphere, that kind of thing. The sense of sitting in a quiet Land Rover with our heads popped out through the sunroof, just listening to the silence or listening to the sound of the bugs and the murmur of this muddy red-brown river. Sorry, knocking something off. To just pick up on that was great. We took millions of photographs of animals and a lot of videotape footage, so we had a lot of reference footage. So we really wanted to be able to get as much material to work from. And also, while being there, I got to... Our guide, our safari guide, was a guy who had grown up in Kenya and he taught us all sorts of funny little songs and things like schoolyard songs, and that's where I learned the phrase Hakuna Matata, the Swahili for it doesn't matter, it's okay, who cares, no worries. Which then I then thought, hey, well, let's make that a song title. He also taught me the Asante Sana Squash Banana that we gave to Rafiki, which was his little schoolyard chant about, thank you very much, Squash Banana, I'm a baboon and you're not. So we adapted that.
I'm sorry. In observing the animals, and then I guess when you got back having the animators go to the zoo and all of that, the concern was I imagine at one point, on a certain level, you wanted the animals to look authentic, but you also wanted them to have a kind of a cartoon look about them.
Right.
How do you go about striking that balance?
Well, that's true, and especially with your comic characters, you tend to push them a little bit farther. You exaggerate their features a little bit more to push their comic aspects. Like I heard you talking about Puma's enormous body, little tiny spindly legs. Well, it's based on reality because those things are really blocky and have these little spindly legs, and they kind of run all very upright with their tails straight up. With the lions, who are more of our straight characters, our straight dramatic characters, we wanted to have a lot of naturalism. So it just makes them more impressive and powerful. You just have to keep seeing how they relate to each other. You see what expresses the character to the best, and then make sure that all the characters feel like they're from the same world. You don't push somebody too far.
Where did the idea for the wildebeest stampede come from, and how did it take shape? Because it's an awesome scene in the film.
A long time ago, the idea was that Mufasa was going to lose his life in a flash flood, and so that was worked on. But then it just somehow, a flood in Africa, it just seemed like a flood could happen anywhere, and it didn't seem so particular to Africa. Certainly they must suffer from flash floods, but it seemed like there could be something else that was more unique. We've had rivers in lots of other movies, so here was an opportunity, so we thought, well, how about a flood of animals? So the flash flood became wildebeests, and it provided a real challenge for trying to, how do you construct something with hundreds of animated characters? So that's why we decided to try to use our computer graphics facilities to try to create that. So
it's also an interesting irony that while the lion, especially this character, was the king of the beasts, he is overtaken by subjects.
Right. I know.
You also couldn't have had that. You couldn't have had Scar make a flood happen.
Make a what?
Flood happen. Scar initiated this.
That's true. It wasn't initiated by Scar originally, so this one we were able to control a little more.
Is that the biggest use of computer in the film?
Definitely.
Could that was done it without, if it were not?
We wouldn't have attempted it. It would have represented too many man and woman hours to do. As it was, they were the first sequence into production, and they were the first people starting on it, building the wildebeest model and running cycles, and they were some of the last scenes done in the movie, so they spanned the whole length of the movie.
There's that showdown with Simba and Scar, which they're walking around each other, and yet the camera seems to follow them in a way that's very live action. So that's also, I imagine, a computer.
Nope.
Really?
No, that was done with traditional methods. The animator started it off, and the animator visualized them walking around each other and turned them in 3 dimensions, and the background was a long strip painted and then panned behind them. It's amazing, isn't it? That's mostly should be attributed to the animator, James Baxter. He was the animator of Rafiki through most of the movie, and at the end of the movie he did that scene with them. It's incredible. He has an amazing mind.
When you get an actor like Jeremy Irons, who surprised me with the range that he brought to that character, do you end up putting in a lot of stuff that wasn't originally planned, like that little Klaus Bueller line? Do new things come into it as he sort of throws things out, and then you say, oh, well, that's so great, let's use this?
Well, it was his voice and his presence that made us think of putting that in. I'm afraid that wasn't his ad-lib, but definitely his voice. After working with him the first time, the richness of his voice and the character that's in his voice gave you all sorts of inspirations of other things to do with the character.
Like what did he do that wasn't originally planned that you found?
Oh, well, one of the things was the whole little scene of where he drops Simba off, telling him to wait for his father. All of that. That came after working with Jeremy for a while, because he could do such a devastating the deprecation, that he would put on this nephew, the way he would talk over his head and reduce the poor character, insult him, while maintaining such a sophisticated attitude was great. So it was an opportunity.
When you initially made that trip to Africa, did you know which animals you were going to incorporate into the film, or did you go there and it was a crapshoot and the most interesting ones?
Well, we did have a fairly good idea. For one thing, we knew that most of our characters were going to be lions, so that was that was a done deal ahead. We also knew that we wanted to do a warthog, and there was some talk about a meerkat. So actually, our cast was pretty well cast, but we did look around. One of the characters that we brought back from Africa was the hornbill. In one of our encampments, the hornbill is the bird who's Rowan Atkinson is doing, the assistant to the king, Zazu. And in one of our encampments on a river, there were these wonderful hornbills that would come down and hop around, and they had such a funny way of looking at you and so much personality. I thought, what a great idea, especially since this character is supposed to be a little snooty and a little full of himself. This enormous nose would be so expressive to do that.
What about meerkats? I mean, you said you had thought of one. I'd never even heard of them before.
Well, that was one of the things we were hoping for, was not to do just all the traditional African animals that we're so used to, the hippos, the giraffes, because they've been used so much. We thought, let's see if we can find some other interesting animals. So the warthog was a fun one. And a meerkat, probably no one knows what a meerkat is. They've got some great ones at the LA Zoo, by the way.
What exactly is it?
But it's like a prairie dog. It's like an African prairie dog. And they live very communally, actually. And there's always someone on guard. And they have these quick little motions. And when we went to, I guess it was at the LA Zoo, the zookeeper, maybe it was the San Diego, anyway, would toss his keys in the air, and all the meerkats, all their heads would look up and watch the keys go. They're so ready, I guess, to be on the lookout for hawks and things, but they'd be scurrying around, all of a sudden they stop. There's the keys again. They were wonderful. So we knew that would start, saying something about what the character is like. He'd be fast, and he'd be, his mind would change directions quickly, and he'd be that kind of character.
Did your research in Africa even go to the extent of all the bugs that we see in the bug eating scene?
Mm-hmm.
Those are indigenous to...
Oh yeah, we looked up lots of bugs. I can't say that we saw them all on the ground in Africa. We did a lot of research out of books when we got back. But if you look through the bug scenes, there's lots of one of the ones that we wanted to do, but we didn't get to do it very much. There's a variety of beetles in Africa, and their backs look like African masks. They are so beautiful. The eyes and the mouths, all these African beetles that look like the masks, and you go, oh, I wonder if that was some of the inspiration for some of the artwork that happened there. It was so exciting. So there's a couple of those wiggling around in the sequence, but we didn't get to do a whole number with them.
You broke some interesting ground in here. We made we've had a lot of discussions about the breaking wind, but there are other things too. There's the seduction scene. I think it's probably the most graphic seduction scene ever in a Disney film. Also, the battle that you were talking about, which is pretty bloody at the end. Was there a sense, as you were putting this together, that we are breaking new ground for Disney?
Yeah. Well, we wanted to show nature in its most dramatic light. Roy Disney, had worked on nature films back when he was young and at the studio, and he encouraged us, let's find the drama of nature. Let's not pussyfoot around. So we really did want to bring out the drama of the life. The more you studied nature in Africa, the more you see it is this life and death struggle all the time. So you couldn't avoid the issue of life and death. There's no blood, actually. I mean, there may be intense battles. We didn't allow ourselves to get bloody, but it's definitely part of nature, and I hope that we communicated some of the rawness and the dynamic aspect to it.
How challenging was it?
Actually, I'm sorry, I need to take him on next table.
Thank you.
And he's gone in 11 minutes. That has to be some kind of a record. I remember, you probably do too, Greg, that this would start to happen towards the end of really long junkets when we had a ton of interviews. they'd be on a schedule, but then they'd start to fall behind. So the interviews would get shorter and shorter as they're trying to catch up because they had TV interviewers waiting upstairs, remember?
Yes.
So yeah, short but sweet. So that brings us to our last interview for The Lion King, and that is the other co-director, Rob Minkoff, yet another Disney guy who graduated from CalArts. Full disclosure, I was actually the editor and co-producer with Laura Gross of all of the bonus features for a movie that Minkoff directed for DreamWorks called Mr. Peabody and Sherman. So I am a little biased here, but since we're not reviewing The Lion King, I guess that doesn't really matter. It is worth pointing out that Disney Animation does not bring in outside directors. Like, if someone has directed a few hit movies for other studios, even if they're hit animated films, they're not going to then go to Disney and direct one of their animated films. That's just not how it works over there. The directors of Disney animated films always come from the studios. They're almost always animators who have worked on other animated films, being given the opportunity to take the helm. And that is how it happened for Rob Minkoff. He had animated on films like The Black Cauldron, The Great Mouse Detective, and The Little Mermaid, and then he worked on the story of Beauty and the Beast, and then they offered him a co-directing position on The Lion King. Now, after he got a taste of directing, Disney apparently didn't have anything else for him to direct, and he wanted to do that more, so he left Disney. He went over to Sony, and he directed Stuart Little and Stuart Little 2. Then he came back to Disney. I think probably Don Hahn brought him back because he was producing this live-action Haunted Mansion movie, and he brought Rob Minkoff in to direct it, starring Eddie Murphy. Rob then did the Jackie Chan movie, The Forbidden Kingdom, for Lionsgate.
I did the press junket for that.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, that validates it, doesn't it? And then he did the aforementioned Peabody and Sherman for DreamWorks Animation. I am not 100% sure about this. I'd have to do a little more research to back up this claim, but I think that Rob Minkoff might be the only Disney animator turned director who has gone on to direct successful films for other studios in both live action and animation.
Oh, good point.
You could almost say Brad Bird, who did one of the Mission Impossibles, but he was at Pixar, not Disney, and he didn't even start there. He made The Iron Giant for Warner Brothers before he went to Pixar. And you could almost say Tim Burton, but he left Disney when he was still just an animator. He had never directed any of their animated films. And before you say The Nightmare Before Christmas, one, that was years later, and two, that movie was directed by Henry Selick. So yeah, I kind of think Minkoff might be the only one. Anyway, when we catch him here in 1994, he hasn't left Disney yet. This was his first time co-directing a film, and he doesn't know yet what a phenomenon the movie's going to be and the opportunities that are going to come about because of it. Greg, anything you want to add before we listen to his interview?
I think you wrapped everything up. It was very, very good. Here is Rob Minkoff.
I am Rob Minkoff, co-director of The Lion King.
Co-director. That's something that I thought the Directors Guild always teaches us, that there is one director of a film.
Right. Well, if we were signatories of the Directors Guild, then maybe the same thing would apply to us.
But how does that work when you have two people or more, or a committee?
How does that work? Right. Well, you know what? That's a good question, because I think committeeism can be a real awful thing for art. And I don't think that we necessarily subscribe to that philosophy. Because one of the things that we're all required to do is to come into it with our own personal objective, our own approach, our own ideas, and come into it with the force or passion of your convictions and see what happens. You know, it's a big mix of people. There's a huge number of people responsible for the making of these movies. It's Roger and my job as directors to try to keep all the pieces of it from, flying off in too many different directions. So that at the end of the day, when you see the movie, it feels like it's all part of one piece of filmmaking. It's all part of the same fabric.
So whose vision is it, though? Is it the two of yours' vision, then, that we're seeing?
Absolutely. One of the things that we have to do, people ask what's the difference between an animation director or a live-action director. And then when you hear about live-action films, people always talk about vision, right? Vision. Now, what does that mean exactly? It means the vision you have means that you're using your imagination, right? You conceive of something, and ultimately you're going to go through this long process of creativity, which will end up with a piece of film where all the elements of it come together. Now, in animation, you have to carry that vision a lot longer than in live action, because in live action, the director gets to go out there with his whole cast in front of those, cameras and work with the material and see it and work with it and respond to it. And what Roger and I have to do is to go into a studio with all of these different actors and fabulous actors, I might add. It's a pretty auspicious cast. We have to go into the recording studio with these actors individually, alone, to record these scenes, right? And what we have to do is to make sure that all of these performances that are done individually somehow fall and fit together as a performance, so that when you watch the movie, you believe that all these characters are in the same room at the same time.
Why are the parts all done separately as opposed to bringing in groups of actors together?
Mostly because of logistics. I think because of the caliber of talent we're using, these people have immense careers, that they have to deal with, and we need a very small amount of their time. It may be 2 hours at the most, and maybe we have about 10 sessions with them over the life of the project. So, basically what we have to do is we have to cater to the actors. We have to go where they are. We'll have to make it convenient for them. It's hard. I mean, can you imagine trying to, just the logistics of trying to get these actors together in the same room is sometimes impossible. Although there are times, and don't get me wrong, there are times where we do bring actors in together. Nathan Lane and Ernie Sabella are a good example of that. Because they're both in New York, they were both in Guys and Dolls for a long time. It was quite convenient for them, and because of the dynamic between the two characters, it was much better to get them in the same room together because their energy was such that they could play off each other, and
Does that factor in casting them because they were in the show together and could be caught at the same time when the roles are so tied?
Interestingly, the way they were cast was they came into an audition, right, separately, in New York, and what they were auditioning for was Hyenas. You heard the story?
Cheech.
Okay.
But tell us anyway.
Okay, so they came in to audition this as individuals, but then they met each other in the hallway, recognized each other, they knew each other, and said, oh, gee, let's go back in. They came back in and said, oh, can we audition again together? And they did, as Hyenas, and gave this just unbelievably, kinetic reading of the scene. And when we listened to it back in California, we were thinking about, because we had to cast the whole movie, and we were thinking, God, they play so great together. They're so much fun. You like them so much. We thought, well, the Hyenas are the bad guys, and you don't necessarily want the audience, you want them to like the bad guys, but, not as much as we like Timon and Pumbaa. And so we said, well, what if they play those parts? What if they play those parts? And then you start to say, yeah, how does that fit? Does that work in the context of the movie? How are they going to blend with all the other actors? How are they, does that feel right? And yeah, well, obviously it did feel right. And you start from there.
Why is there a hyena named Ed?
He's sort of the combination between Harpo Marx and Ed McMahon. Doesn't say much, but he laughs a lot. So we actually thought about getting Ed McMahon at one time, and thought, well, maybe not. So that's actually how we named the character Ed.
Who plays Ed? Because it actually says in the production notes that it's Cheech, which of course is a mistake.
Oh no! Ed is Jim Cummings, who's actually quite well known within the animation industry. He does tons of voices for Disney and other animation studios, and he's a great guy. And we brought him in. Actually, what's interesting about that was we had one of the writers, Jonathan Roberts, did our scratch dialogue, because one of the things we'll do in the making of the movie is we'll do all the dialogue ourselves first, basically to kind of see if it's working before we'll go to the actors. And Jonathan had done these just hilarious laughs, and he's not really an actor, per se. He's never done it. So he had come up with these just hilarious laughs, and we thought, oh God, we're going to have to replace these. And for a while I thought, I don't think we should. They're so great. They get such great responses. And finally, because the miking on him was not great, and it just wasn't kind of the quality we needed, we finally said we had to go with someone else. And when we brought Jim Cummings in, it went up another notch, and it was that much funnier. And we said, so it was a great, it worked out really well, because we kept everything that was kind of odd and quirky and funny about the character, and then ended up with a much more polished performance.
How do you were talking about having to get these individual performances where they're very rarely together, make them meld, not only connect them as voices, but then connect them to the picture. To the picture. How do you make sure that it becomes one whole?
The first thing that you do is, a lot of times what we'll do is read opposite the actors. Both Roger and I will do that at different times. And what you're trying to do is, you try to get the actor up to a certain level of energy in the performance, right? And then once you've done it with one actor, and they've set their performance, then you're able to take the memory of their performance into the next session. And then you can read opposite the new actor or actress, depending, and try to get back to that same rhythm. You know, you don't really tell them. There have been times we've experimented and it's always failed. Is we've recorded the dialogue with another actor and then we put it in the headphones of the new actor who's there alone, and it doesn't work because they're responding to a live person, and so we're there, you know, to try to help bring that actor to that same place.
What happens if it doesn't work? Do you then, I mean, when you lay it against the picture and it just...
Well, we don't lay it against the picture per se. I mean, what we do is we build the picture from those lines of dialogue using storyboards. And you build your performance that way before you ever do a frame of animation. So you've set the vocal performance first.
So what happens if it doesn't work? I mean, a joke doesn't work, or what?
Oh, well, that goes on through the whole process. We'll play this movie, you know, for a lot of people within the studio. We'll play it for all the animators and all the other artists who are working on the movie. And as you watch the film and you feel the places where it's working, where it's not working, and you get a chance to go back and polish the scenes. So then you go back to a sort of a writing phase and you rewrite the dialogue and you re-storyboard the dialogue, and then you go back to the actor and you rework lines. And sometimes, that's what I was saying, sometimes you've done a scene, you know, literally a year before, and then you end up back in the recording studio with that same actor doing that same scene, but with a few different, and it may not be the whole scene, it may just be a couple of different lines of dialogue, and you've got to get them to record it and sound the same and be in the same place and have the same sort of energy and all of that, so that, again, that when you see it on the screen, you're not thinking of that. And someone actually was quite complimentary by saying that they were surprised at the fact that we didn't record the actors together, because it did feel like they were really responding to each other.
I think no one would ever know if they didn't.
Were you part of the team that went to Africa to take a look at
Unfortunately, I missed that trip.
Wondering what difference that made, actually seeing the setting that everything takes place in.
Well, you know, one of the things that we did, and maybe it was, well, a lot of discussions were had about the subject, but we were thinking, you know, this story it has to be sort of metaphorical, and we could either be absolutely literal with the interpretations of Africa, or we could allow the landscape to serve the story, and that's what we did. And so we've got, you know, sort of disparate locations, from jungles, rainforests to the savannah, and we allowed ourselves that sort of freedom in terms of the storytelling, because again, you need the settings to inform the story more so than just be an accurate depiction per se of the place.
There's such a change in the way Disney animation has been done in the last two films, with these really bold, bright, lush colors, whereas before it was more fairy tale-ish and no pastel. Can you talk a little bit about that and how much involvement you have in that kind of thing when you go into the animators and say, I want that one scene, you know, I can't wait to be king,
Sure.
to be, you know, all primary colors because
Sure.
I'm a little kid.
Sure. Well, that gets back to the earliest parts of the conceptual process, when you're trying to define what the different sequences are. You know, for example, we had that song and we were looking for a way to interpret it, because it was an up-tempo song. We knew we were going to have all the animals. It was storyboarded with all the animals dancing and singing, and we said, gee, you know, the animals from Circle of Life just aren't going to cut it. You know, if we have those same realistic animals singing and dancing, it's just not going to work. So we said, well, we've got to take liberties with this sequence. We've got to go push past the boundaries, and we ended up with the idea of making it a complete fantasy sequence from the child's eye view, which then served the story, you know, from because what we were telling is sort of Simba's psychological, you know, state of mind at that time in his life, and then it becomes, you know, a tool in order to further the story development process. But those get into the sort of earliest conceptual stages.
And how about that whole color thing? I mean, that is such a new idea for Disney, a new look.
A new look? Boy, having seen every Disney movie repeatedly, I don't see it as being a new look in that sense. It is absolutely its own thing. It's different, but I don't think we go into it necessarily consciously saying, you know, I don't think we're that self-conscious about it. I think you look for the appropriate way to approach the material. You know, you try to, again, I mean, that's what's interesting. We're all part of this sort of renaissance in animation. You know, I've been at the studio for almost 11 years. So I was here before this all happened, and you know, at that time I used to think, boy, my timing is way off. I should have been born 50 years ago, you know, to really be a part of the golden age. And looking at it from this point of view, I can say, wow, you know, my timing was really good.
But it is very noticeable to the audience. I think we can point out from a specific film when the colors did get richer, especially with Aladdin. The reds were never deeper red, and the blues. And in this film, again, we're seeing an even wider spectrum of very rich, deep colors.
Yeah.
And it's nothing's flat about the color in these two.
Well, then that's that's a tribute to the artists, the painters who are making the film. And possibly it could be attributed to the, even the technology of film. Maybe the different printing stocks. Actually, one of the things we've noticed on Aladdin and this picture was that red is a very difficult color to reproduce on film. And that certainly is a part of it. The fact that the computer processes have an effect on all of that, you can't dismiss that. Because one of the things we do now is we're not painting on cells. All of the flat artwork, which is done by hand, all the pencil line drawings are scanned into the computer, and we're painting everything using sort of a paint box technique. And we're combining artwork in a different way. If you think of it this way, when you have a cell which is painted on plastic and you literally put the piece of plastic over the background, and sometimes you'd have 4, 5, 6 or more layers of cells, it actually does have a diffusing diffusing quality as far as the color is concerned, because you're literally, you're cutting down the amount of light that's able to get back to the camera, and because now we do it with computers, you're able to actually, combine all of the artwork levels in a sort of a one-to-one. Maybe you could think of it in terms of like CD sound technology. Digital sound technology gives you an accurate, much more accurate depiction of the sound than an analog sound technology. So in that way, maybe it's influencing the color palette.
Rob, what about the inevitable pendulum effect in this animation renaissance that you had Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, that obviously been great films, a string of them that can't go on forever.
Yeah.
Are you aware of that fear? Is that
well, boy. That it can't go on forever?
Well, that inevitably,
it's a depressing thought.
Well, I would think it might be a scary thought.
Forever. No, well, that's true.
That inevitably, critically, there's going to be some backlash. Maybe the audience is old.
Everybody
thinks
fair.
Lion King is going to be a giant hit.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that hopefully the way that will be, that we'll all take that on board. That is a totally valid concern, and hopefully we'll all take that on board and try to keep pushing the boundaries of the medium. When we stop pushing the boundaries of the medium, it will kill the business. You look at any art form, and what you see is a continuation from one movement to the next. That's all basically. It's carried on the shoulders of artists who are willing to take what was done in the past and to move sort of into the future. Why should animation have any different sort of story than live action filmmaking?
Then what step has been taken here?
What step? I think that what we've done, well, that's interesting, because if you want to put it into context, when I came to the studios, the first person that I studied under was Eric Larson, who was one of the 9 old men from Snow White, right? From the Snow White days, from the history of the studio. Just the other day, right here on the lot, a bunch of sort of prominent animators from the department were brought together along with the remaining 4 9 old men, and the history of the studio became sort of compressed in that moment when you realized, well, what have we done? What we've done is we've all taken this art form, which was incredibly vital about 30 years ago, and said we need to celebrate what was great about it then, but do it for a modern audience and make it contemporary, for no other reason than to please ourselves as artists.
Don't you think that the old stuff, though, is still contemporary? I mean, who doesn't love every old movie you bring them out? And
absolutely. Well, that's absolutely why I think we're all in love with those movies. But the thing is that you have to, again, you couldn't make a Snow White. There are certain aspects of some of those films which date. I mean,
But she was so dumb.
Well, there you go. I mean, look at Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid. The fact is that you have to take you take the issues of the day. Even the fact that this film deals with, I think, a very serious issue in the death of the death of the father, and deals with it. I don't think that's an issue that would have been dealt with maybe 30 years ago.
Can we talk about that for a moment? Because
there you go. But I think that do you think that was dealt with? I would say it wasn't. I would say she was killed in the movie. This is something that we were very sensitive to. She was killed in the movie by hunters, and she disappeared from the story, and she was never referred to again. And it left me kind of disturbed. I think, I mean, in the sense that you feel abandoned and you feel no resolution to that idea.
Does that mean we're more sensitive now then to the effect of films on children than they were in Walt's era?
Are we? I don't know that I think that the social considerations are different today than they were then. I don't know that they're any less sensitive. I just think that the world is a different place today. And I think that we make these films and we know that these films are going to play to a huge number of people around the world. And you can't do it. We're not working in that sort of vacuum.
This is that moment when the father dies and then the kid's running away, Simba, is very frightening. I mean, I'm not a kid and it scared me actually.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's going to have, kids who come to these movies, their hearts are completely open to this stuff. How I know that this was a big concern at the studio. Tell me how you felt about it and how you sort of resolved it.
Well, when I came into the picture, into the mix, one of the first issues that we dealt with was how are we going to make this movie about that? Because that was part of the fabric of the story when I started. The things that didn't happen was he didn't go in. Simba wasn't forced into exile. He wasn't led by Rafiki to the vision of his father and didn't resolve then to go back and take his place. And those were all ideas that we came up with, I think, in response to the idea that if the father is going to be killed, we need to take that idea in all seriousness and make that the driving force behind the film. And it really has to be about that. And if we've succeeded, and again, we'll have to wait to see how what the response is. The power, I think, in the film is the fact that it deals with that subject quite honestly and quite, seriously.
Before you run away, you are Roger Rabbit. I realize that sitting here listening to you, watching you. What about the Roger Rabbit sequel?
What about it? Well, it's still in development. So far, I don't think there's plans. I mean, they keep talking about making it. I worked on it for about a year. I think Disney and Amblin both have to decide. It's a huge project. It's so, it's an expensive project. And because there's so much at stake, it's made everybody, I think, much more cautious about what they're willing to do. And I think until they kind of resolve on what story they want to tell, I don't think it will get made. But once they do, there's certainly an audience for it.
Will you direct it if the chance comes by?
If I'm approached.
Because you were preparing to direct it.
I was, yeah, absolutely. Again, it's hard to speculate where things are going to go, and again, I sort of have to take it as it comes. I'll cross that bridge if it's built.
So we are back from the interview with Rob Minkoff.
We are, and this probably doesn't need to be said, but the Roger Rabbit sequel that he talked about still hasn't happened. There have been many scripts for it written over the years, and none of them have moved forward for various reasons. The latest I've read was literally 6 months ago, where Robert Zemeckis says that there's a new script that he thinks is really good, but he also says that Disney is not interested in making it. But we did get the Happy Time Murders, which was practically a remake, so, there's that. So that is it for The Lion King.
It's a lot, Matt. That was a lot.
Well, it was 2 episodes worth.
2 episodes worth, yeah.
So next month, we have a very cool movie. We have Chasing Amy, Kevin Smith film.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
So we have that to look forward to. In the meantime, what do we like to talk about at the end of every show?
We like to plug our show. Listeners, we have a ton of episodes up, really great legacy movies for you guys to deep dive on and listen to these great interviews. But first, check out our...
dirty.
Oh, yeah, a little bit, kind of like that. If you want to check out our website, go to mattandgregpodcast.com. Please, we also live in Facebook. We have a community in Facebook. Check out facebook.com/Matt and Greg. Please like our Facebook page, and we have.
Please clap.
Please clap. Please like, clap, do whatever. And also, you can catch us on any kind of podcatcher: SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play.
Yeah, run a search on the name of the show, which is Matt and Greg Used to Interview Movie Stars. If you search for that, our show will come up.
And you can catch my more scribblings from me writing about entertainment on deepestdream.com. I have another podcast, Cinematics. All of this stuff, all of this information can be found at the home source. Again, mattandgregpodcast.com. Most importantly, give us your feedback. Email us, comment on our shows. We want to
spread the word, tell your friends.
Yes. We are here for you. We're bringing this movie pretty much gratis for you guys, fellow cinephiles who want to hear all.
Not pretty much. We make no money whatsoever.
Yes, we are in the negative zone for a positive return. So I like that, right?
Wow.
So until we will be back again with Chasing Amy, a little Kevin Smith. I think one of Kevin Smith's best movies. Matt, you want to say anything?
I would agree.
Matt, you want to say anything else before we leave?
Oh, I very much don't.
He very much don't, but we very much will be back in a month. Take care, guys.
We now return you to your regularly scheduled lives.